Today, we're digging into the playbook of an absolute industrial giant, Siemens Indonesia Group, or SIG. But this isn't your average corporate story. This is a real saga, a 4-year battle for survival and supremacy against some incredible odds.
And it all kicks off with this single massive number, 50%. Just let that sink in. That is the chunk of the entire Indonesian cement market that SIG controls. They're not just a company in the market. For a lot of people, they are the market.
Now, being the undisputed leader, that sounds great, right? But it also means you've got the biggest target on your back. And with that kind of power comes some serious pressure. And that, right there, is where our story really begins.
So, you're probably asking, how does a titan like this get into trouble? Well, it turns out that even a colossus can find itself in a really tight spot when a perfect storm of market forces starts brewing.
And here is the core of the problem, laid out plain and simple. By 2024, Indonesia could pump out almost 120 million tons of cement. The catch? The country only needed about 68 million tons. That huge gap creates one thing and one thing only: a brutal, no-holds-barred fight for every single customer.
But it wasn't just about too much supply. Oh no, this was a war on multiple fronts. You had new, scrappy players jumping in, slashing prices to grab market share. The post-pandemic recovery was way slower than anyone expected. And then, the knockout punch. The price of coal, a key ingredient, just went through the roof. It was, quite literally, a perfect storm.
So what does that do? It puts SIG in a financial vice grip. I mean, look at this. The revenues were actually shrinking, down over 6%, as they fought tooth and nail. At the very same time, the cost to just make their stuff was climbing by 8%. That's a formula for disaster if you don't do something and fast.
Which brings us to the billion-dollar question. When you're king of the castle and everyone is storming the walls, what do? Do you just hunker down and hope for the best, or do you completely rethink the design of your fortress? For SIG, the answer was obvious. It was time for a major pivot. So how did they fight back? Well, they didn't just play defense. They launched a full-blown counterattack on multiple fronts. Their strategy wasn't just about grinding out more sales. It was about fighting smarter, using innovation, digital tools, and some really clever partnerships.
And, this wasn't some last-minute panic move. It was clearly part of their thinking for a while. This quote from their 2021 report says it all. They knew the game was changing, and that the only way to win in a tough industry was to innovate faster and better than anyone else.
Okay, so their plan wasn't just one single idea. It was this really cool coordinated offensive built on 3 powerful pillars. Let's break them down one by one.
First, they went all in on digital. They launched platforms like Access Toko, which connected them directly to thousands of small retail shops, making ordering and payments a breeze. But then they took it a step further with Sobat Banggu, which is more than just a store. It's an entire platform to help you design and build your whole house. They're trying to own the entire journey.
Second, they had a realization. They couldn't just be a cement company anymore. So they moved downstream, creating products with better profit margins. Things like pre-mixed mortar, and my personal favorite, these precision interlock bricks. Seriously, think of them like giant construction Legos that make building way faster and cheaper. So smart.
Okay, that's all really cool innovation. But the big question is, did it pay the bills? Let's switch gears and look at the hard numbers to see if this big strategic shift actually worked.
The numbers here tell a really interesting story. First, notice that revenue actually grew through all this chaos, which is impressive on its own. But the real magic is in that last column, total liabilities. While growing and staying profitable, they managed to chop their debt from almost $35 trillion down to 32 trillion rupiah. That is some incredible financial discipline.
And here is a reward for all that discipline. By 2024, they'd managed to slash their net financial expenses, which is basically the interest they pay on their debt, by over 20%. They weren't just making money, they were keeping more of it by getting their financial house in order. All right, now for the final piece of the puzzle, and you could argue it's the most important one. SIG understood that to really be successful for the long haul, it wasn't enough to just be financially strong. They had to build their entire future on a greener, more sustainable foundation. So, to see how far they've come, you have to know their starting point. Back in 2021, for every ton of cement they made, they produced 593 kilograms of CO2. That number became their benchmark, the line in the sand they had to beat.
And they didn't just chip away at it, they attacked it from every angle. They're using less clinker, which is the most carbon-heavy part of cement. They're swapping out coal for things like biomass and industrial waste. They're even capturing waste heat from their factories to generate their own power. It's a full spectrum assault on emissions.
And guess what? The world is taking notice. This isn't just them talking themselves up. It's getting validated by outsiders. They're winning a ton of prestigious environmental awards. And maybe more importantly, financial ratings agencies are actually upgrading their outlook to positive, specifically because of their green strategy.
Okay, this is the masterstroke. This is where it all comes together. SIG started using something called a sustainability-linked loan. The idea is brilliant and simple. If they hit their green targets and reduce emissions, the banks literally give them a better deal on their loans, lower interest rates. They've made being green profitable.
So, we end up right back where we started, with a giant that was under siege. The story of SIG seems to show that, in this day and age, the best defense isn't just about having the biggest market share. It's about a deep commitment to innovation and sustainability. And it leaves us with a really big question for pretty much every industry out there. In today's world, is a greener foundation the only one strong enough to build a real future on?